So you want to run some growth hormone, but you're on the fence between growth hormone secretagogues, Chinese generics, or Western-made, pharmaceutical-grade, branded and prescribable growth hormone instead. Don't you worry, your online stare daddy is here to help you make your decision nice and easy. Vigorous Steve here. Welcome to the age-old debate of which class of serum growth hormone increasing compounds are the best, pharmaceuticals, generics, or secretagogues. And the easy answer to that is, it depends. It highly depends on your individual finances, your sourcing abilities, the expected results, and the accompanying side effects. If you're after an equivalent of 2 to 3 AU's growth hormone and you're young and you only know gray area peptide websites, or your US-based compounding pharmacy doesn't really care about Article 503A and B, in which the United States Food and Drug Administration limited prescription of growth hormone secretagogues, then I would go with exactly that. Even though, depending on the stack of growth hormone secretagogues that you're going with, 2 to 3 IUs of Chinese generics might be considerably cheaper. But if you're going after higher dosages, you know, the bodybuilder dosages, then I would stick with pharmaceutical grade growth hormone, as that's exactly what it's been designed for. HIV positive patients use up to 18 IUs growth hormone daily, and the side effects, depending on the pharmaceutical brand and the administration route, appear to be quite tolerable. Let me explain. So let's start with pharmaceutical grade growth hormone first, as it's my favorite, and most bodybuilders salivate at the idea of running pharmaceutical, while we cringe at secretagogues, and we reluctantly use generics during the off-season so we can save a little bit of money for upcoming contest prep or cutting phase, in which we run pharmaceutical grade GH instead. So what makes pharmaceutical grade a pharmaceutical? First, it's a Food and Drug Administration's approval or an equivalent medical regulatory agency, which is country specific, for medical usage in the country of manufacturing and for medical application in other countries in which the growth hormone is exported to. Growth hormone manufacturers are subject to quality control, governmental oversight, World Health Organization standardization, third-party testing, and the full hand of the law through class action lawsuits in case they mess up during production, which happens occasionally, don't get me wrong. And all things considering, I would say that pharmaceutical grade growth hormone has the highest potency, the highest purity, the best product consistency, and overall the best quality, which is also what you're paying for, right? You're not only paying for the quality, but also for brand recognition. And since these products are meant to be prescribed in cases of growth hormone deficiency, HIV positive patients, muscle wasting diseases, Turner syndrome, or other short stature conditions, that means you're also paying for the middleman who somehow, someway got you this growth hormone out of the regular medical supply chain into your hands. And by the way, exogenous growth hormone for anti-aging purposes, that's considered an off-label prescription. The World Health Organization standardized growth hormone dosages into international units, abbreviated to IU, where 0.33 milligrams equals 1 IU growth hormone and 1 milligram equals 3 IUs of growth hormone. Nowadays, pharmaceutical growth hormone is presented in either vials containing lyophilized pucks or pens or cartridges with pre-mixed reconstituted growth hormone that is surprisingly stable at room temperature and even during international transport by post. But let's not go there in this video. Growth hormone on prescription might cost anywhere between $12 up to $25 per one international unit, but the insurance company might cover part of the cost or cover it fully. And on the black market, pharmaceutical growth hormone outside of the regular medical supply chain might cost anywhere between $3.5 up to $12 per one international unit. It seems that the average price across most brands and product formulations is about $6 per unit, but I would say that the fair value for pharmaceutical grade growth hormone is between $4 to $5 per unit. Here's a complete list of all the pharmaceutical growth hormone manufacturers, their brands, and the different products which they have available. It's a pretty extensive list. Most of these aren't really available. Norditropin is available, Omnitrope, Sizin, Humatrope, Serostim, Genotropin, and then maybe occasionally you can find a source containing Sinatropin or Gintropin or some of the other ones which are on the screen, right? It highly depends on where you live, obviously, because these might be FDA approved in particular countries and might not exactly export extensively. Now, what separates Chinese generics or Indian generics from Western-made pharmaceutical-grade growth hormone? First of all is governmental oversight, third-party testing, overall standardized quality adherence and quality control. And it seems that the generic manufacturers basically adjust potency, purity, and IU content of the growth hormone vials based on the specifications of the purchaser. So if you have a source that sells Chinese generics and they want 4 IUs of growth hormone in a vial that labels it as 10 IUs, then that's what you're getting. You're not getting 10 IUs, you're getting 4 IUs. So basically, with Chinese or Indian generics, you never really know what you're getting, and you might have to test batch to batch to assure that you're getting what you pay for. I mean, generics might be underdosed, have subpar purity, might contain other peptides or compounds which result in undesirable side effects like water retention or injection site irritation. Some generics might even contain a small amount of a diuretic, like mannitol, for example, while other generics might contain antidiuretic hormone and really make you bloated as f***. And thus, the inexperienced among us might assume that this increased bloat is actually caused by a very high potency and purity growth hormone, where in reality it's just water retention, your blood pressure is increasing, and you're not getting any anabolism out of it. And it might even be relabeled human chorionic gonadotropin, HCG, but it's easily determined with a pregnancy test where you test positive. Congratulations, you're pregnant and your growth hormone is not growth hormone. It might be relabeled growth hormone releasing peptide 2 or 6, making you incredibly hungry, or another growth hormone secretagogue, increasing prolactin levels and cortisol levels, and might even give you facial flushing. But to be fair, nowadays that isn't much of an issue anymore. The quality of Chinese-made or Indian-made generics has improved a lot over the years, where depending on the brand, the potency and the purity might actually be on par with Western-made FDA-approved pharmaceutical-grade growth hormone at a significantly lower cost. So what do we need to pay attention to when we go with Chinese or Indian-made generics? Does the vial have a vacuum? Because if there's no vacuum with a fancy branded logo on top, it means that the source, the manufacturer, took a yellow top or blue top or black top or red top, whatever the discrepancy between the potency and the purity is amongst all of those tops. They took the top off and put their own fancy branded top on the vial, which ultimately makes it lose its vacuum. So that means some bacteria or other contaminants could end up in the lyophilized puck. So if the vial has a fancy branded top, but no vacuum, it's probably contaminated, right? Or there's a very high chance of it being contaminated, and the growth hormone might denature as soon as you reconstitute it. Once you reconstitute the generic growth hormone and the solution turns cloudy, that means that the peptides have now been denatured, and the amino acid structure is either unfolded or broken apart into smaller peptides. When you read the medical insert of pharmaceutical growth hormone, Increlex, IGF-1, insulin, or other peptides, it specifically mentions not to inject cloudy solution because you might have an adverse reaction. This is now formally known as growth hormone, not the exact same amino acid sequence of bioidentical growth hormone, right? Keep this in mind. If the solution turns cloudy on your generic hGH, just throw it in the trash. It could be caused by temperature fluctuations where they store the growth hormone in some sort of hot warehouse, and then it goes into the airplane by post where it almost freezes, and then it ends up in the post office in a hot climate, in a hot warehouse again, and then it finally ends up in your fridge. And the same goes for premixed, reconstituted generics presented in fancy pens, which seems to be all the hype nowadays. If those arrive cloudy, just throw it in the bin. It's no longer growth hormone. But if there's a vacuum and the solution is clear, proceed with caution still. Inject 1 IU or 2 IU of this generic growth hormone subcutaneously to see if you get an adverse reaction. Is there any redness at the injection site? Any post-injection pain, right? Try this for a couple days before you decide to go intramuscular. Do a couple trial runs to see how you respond to this generic hGH. Send it over for third-party testing at a company like Janoschik. If it ends up being a purity of over 97%, then it's probably good to go. And it doesn't mean that a purity of 96% or 95% is considerably worse, but what are you getting for those other 3 to 5%? Right? Are those binders? Are those antidiuretic hormones or diuretics like mannitol making you lose all the water retention that growth hormone can potentiate? We're not entirely sure because third-party testing doesn't determine what the binders or the other preservatives or diuretics or antidiuretic hormones might be. They only check how much growth hormone is contained within the lyophilized puck or the premixed cartridge or pen. And then lastly, you can do a serum growth hormone test either through intramuscular administration or even intravenous administration, albeit that that's not for the faint of heart. You could do 10 IUs intramuscular, let's say 2 to 3 hours before checking serum growth hormone levels, after which serum growth hormone should be at least over 20 nanograms per milliliter, but ideally within a 3-hour window, it should be over 30 nanograms per milliliter on a 10 IU administration. And if you go with IV, the dose can be significantly lower at, let's say, 2 IUs growth hormone intravenously. Since circulating growth hormone levels have a half-life of about 20 to 30 minutes, you need to check serum growth hormone levels within 5 minutes. I think 5 minutes is the best time because that allows for your blood circulation to end up with a homogenized growth hormone concentrations, but not enough time for this exogenous growth hormone to metabolize in the bloodstream. So you IV 2 IUs growth hormone, and then you check serum growth hormone levels about 5 minutes later, after which serum growth hormone levels should be at least 80 nanograms per milliliter, but in many cases, it's undetectable over 100 nanograms per milliliter. Right? I would still send it in for third-party testing first to see what the purity is, because you don't want to IV or intramuscular anything which has contaminants or bacteria making you go into anaphylactic shock. It might be a little bit of an exaggeration, but it's still worth mentioning here. Now, over the last couple of years, the price for high quality, high potency, high purity generic GH has come down a lot, with the reported price of 1 international units being anywhere between 60 cents up to $2. But that depends on how many people are between you and the manufacturer, and obviously on how much you purchase, because there's always a bulk discount. So if everything checks out and you get great serum levels, but minimal water retention or other side effects like carpal tunnel, even at 18 IUs per day, then by all means, stick to generic GH. You'll probably save yourself a lot of money in the process. At 18 IUs per day, it could be a huge price difference, anywhere between $11 up to $63 compared to pharmaceutical grade growth hormone. That saves you over $1,500 per month, which guess what? You can buy yourself 2, maybe even 3 boxes of Increlex and make exceptional gains. And otherwise you spend your money on IGF-1, LR3 or DES, or even more steroids, or just put that money into Bitcoin, let that accumulate, and now you're large and in charge and rich a couple of years down the line. And when it comes to growth hormone secretagogues, the results that you might get from them are highly dependent on your age and what else you're doing alongside a specific combination of growth hormone secretagogues. But I already made a dedicated video about how to maximize the effects of growth hormone secretagogues with several over-the-counter supplements and best practices. I'll link it at the end of this one. Assuming you do everything right and you're reasonably young, then you might be able to expect an equivalent serum concentration compared to exogenous growth hormone of, let's say, 2 IUs, 3 IUs, maybe 4 IUs if you're lucky. And for this small increase in serum growth hormone levels, you might also increase your prolactin levels or your cortisol levels, or lose insulin sensitivity, get full-blown insulin resistance, get uncontrollable appetite. You might experience nausea or facial flushing, or simply spend a disproportionate amount of money for this marginal increase of serum growth hormone if you were to compare that to Chinese generics. But before we do the cost-to-benefit analysis, here are some commonly used growth hormone secretagogues. The injectable secretagogues are growth hormone releasing peptide 2 and 6, ixamorelin, ipamorelin, CJC1295 with or without the drug affinity complex, somatorelin, sermorelin, and tesamorelin. And the oral growth hormone secretagogues are MK-677 and NN703, albeit that it's unavailable as of now. And these are 2 commonly used secretagogue combinations, antagonizing both the growth hormone releasing hormone receptors and the ghrelin receptors, resulting in the highest amount of growth hormone secretion from the pituitary gland. You have a combination of CJC1295 with the drug affinity complex, allowing for 1 administration per week, between 1 milligram to 2 milligrams subcutaneous, and oral administration of MK-677 at, let's say, 20 milligrams to 30 milligrams before bed every single day. If you do a little bit of cost-to-benefit analysis, you see that this particular stack, based on all of the gray area peptide websites that I was able to find, selling ibutamoren, that's usually on the SARM websites, even though ibutamoren is not a SARM, doesn't activate the androgen receptors at all. And the cost would be, depending on the dosage, anywhere between $2.80 up to $5.40 daily. But if your serum growth hormone concentrations are comparable to 2 to 3 IU's exogenous generic, GH, which would run you $1.20 up to $6 daily, but at least it's considerably cheaper compared to pharmaceutical grades. If you were to do 2 to 3 IU's pharma, then that would run you anywhere between $7 up to $36 daily. Now, if you go with a combination of tesamorelin, 1 to 2 milligrams subcutaneous twice daily, and ipamorelin, 150 to 300 micrograms subcutaneous twice daily, which is somewhat conservative. Some guys run that up to 3 times daily. At 2 times daily, at the lower end of the dosage range, it's, let's say, $10 per day. And at the higher end of the dosage range, and going with more reputable gray area peptide websites, might cost you $36 per day. So that's significantly more expensive than Chinese generics and even a cheap pharmaceutical grade growth hormone. And it's probably because tesamorelin is just expensive, right? It's not easy to come by. And depending on the source, so the gray area peptide website or maybe the compounding pharmacy that is still willing to prescribe this, you might be spending a significantly higher amount than any source of generics or cheaper sources of pharmaceutical growth hormone. So why even bother when growth hormone secretagogues have diminishing returns at higher dosages and potentiate a good amount of side effects if you're really going after this serum equivalent of 2 to 3 IUs, maybe 4 IUs of exogenous growth hormone. Not to mention that the US FDA recently made it a lot more difficult for compounding pharmacies or hormone optimization clinics or anti-aging clinics to prescribe growth hormone secretagogues under Article 503A and B, linked down below, which includes CJC 1295, but they don't specifically mention if that's with or without the drug affinity complex. They list a growth hormone releasing peptide 2 and 6, MK-677, ibutamoren, and ipamorelin are now basically prohibited from prescription. And even anti-obesity drug 9604 and pegylated mechanogrowth factor are listed under Article 503A and B, but at least they didn't include hGH frag or IGF-1 LR3 or DES yet. And the only growth hormone secretagogues which are still allowed to be prescribed, not limited yet, are examorelin, somatorelin, sermorelin, and tesamorelin. But your mileage might vary if you combine either somatorelin, sermorelin, or tesamorelin with examorelin. Those are not popular growth hormone secretagogue combinations. So, long story short, if you're young and you have limited funds and a very cooperative pituitary gland, then by all means, dude, go with CJC 1295 with the drug affinity complex plus MK-677. Because that seems to be the most cost-effective and it's reasonably easy to source because all of the gray area peptide websites and SARM websites host these kinds of products and you can simply use your mom's credit card, right? You should use your own credit card, but well, kids are going to do what kids are going to do. But if you want to go over an equivalent of 2 IUs, 3 IUs, 4 IUs of exogenous growth hormone, then you need to use exogenous growth hormone in the form of Chinese generics or pharmaceutical grades. Initially, during the off-season, when you already hold a good amount of water retention, if that's from a boatload of carbohydrates or insulin, then maybe just go with generics. I mean, it's very cost-effective. If you want to ramp up the dose to, let's say, 8 IUs, 12 IUs, 18 IUs, then this is probably your cheapest option. You will never get such high serum concentration from growth hormone secretagogues. And if you were, I mean, the side effects would be astronomical as well. So during the off season, I would go with Chinese generics and then pocket all the money that you're not spending on saving on pharmaceutical growth hormone for the time you're running pharmaceutical growth hormone during a contest prep or cutting phase. And nowadays with high potency and high quality Chinese generics, you can really save yourself a lot of money with the exact same results as pharmaceutical grades. But when you compete, and you know that all of your competition in the bodybuilding contest is using pharmaceutical grade, even if you were to do 20 IUs of Chinese generics and you place second, guess who's going to beat themselves up the entire off-season the next off season after placing second, not getting your pro card, you're going to hate yourself for not running pharmaceutical grade, because in your mind, it could probably make the difference between first and second, right? So keep this in mind. If you do a bodybuilding contest and you want to win, just play it safe. Spend the money, use pharmaceutical grade. And if you're a snob like I am, finances are a little bit of an afterthought, and you just want the best quality because you respect your body, you love your body, and you only want the best for your body, then use pharmaceutical grade or upwards. Right? If cost is not an issue and you want the best quality, then pharmaceutical grade is where it's at. What matters most in your decision-making process is the results that you get for the amount of money that you spent and the side effects that you get alongside of those results. It's as simple as that. You don't need to overcomplicate it. If you get great results and minimal side effects on Chinese generics, just go with that. Right? Just go with that. If you want higher dosages, more than growth hormone secretagogues can potentiate, because all things considering, Chinese generics are still the cheapest. And if you go with a high quality source with good potency and good purity, then the side effects are going to be minimal on your physique and on your wallet. Food for thought. Thank you guys so much for watching. You can find everything that I'm associated with down below in the YouTube description section. Follow me on Instagram and TikTok at Vigorous Steve, Vigorous Crew. You guys know what to do. A frontable bicep for you guys. This is all pharmaceutical grade. 2.4, I use pharmaceutical Sizin every single day before bed or before the workouts. I haven't touched Chinese generics in a very, very, very long time. But after doing some additional research and knowing a couple good sources, don't ask. YouTube is not a source board, don't ask. After knowing a couple good sources through my good friends in the bodybuilding and fitness community, I might want to make a change and keep a little bit of extra money for other purposes. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.